Greetings brothers, have you had problems fighting Death Guard in 9th edition since their new codex release? If so, then this video is designed specifically to help you out, let you know exactly what you need to deal with and how you can beat them on the battlefield consistently. So know your enemy, the Death Guard. Thanks for being here guys, and if you get any value out of this video, please hit like. We're going to break it down into about 8 different sections, and in each section I'm going to be telling you some tips and tricks that I've used to consistently beat Death Guard in 9th edition. So we've got the overview, we've got the army abilities, we've got the plague companies, we've got their psychic strength, we've got various thoughts and strategies that we can employ, we've got some of their key units, battle priorities, and also a bit of a summary. But we have consistently beat Death Guard. We do fight them every few weeks here on the channel, so if you want to see some of these in action, you can totally check us out. That's live every Monday night. Now let's get into just a little bit about who the Death Guard are. So the Death Guard are foulness made manifest. They are a vision of unnatural corruption, of nobility, courage and strength perverted into nightmarish foulness and diseased might. City worlds, even entire systems rot at their touch. The powers of Nurgle spread inexorably wherever the Death Guard raise their flybone banners. So the Death Guards are the greatest champions of the Plague God, Grandfather Nurgle, his favoured spreaders of his bountiful gifts, and by gifts they mean poisons and rot. Look upon them and see the signs: pus seeping from their festering wounds that never heal, miasmic smoths of corrosive stinking gas hanging thickly in the air whenever Nurgle's chosen tread, the wriggling, lamprey mouth tick-leeched that clamp onto the rotting flesh, the droning billions of their plague flies that swarm the battlefields they stalk, and the ships in which they course through the stars. What is shared between in the lore and how the Death Guard are actually on the battlefield is their resilience nature, their lumbering and inexorable advance, and the ability to infect the enemy with their deadly rotten plagues. They're typically slow, but they're very, very durable. One of the best ways to enjoy success against the Death Guard armies is to use the speed of your army against them, but there's also a lot of rules you need to be aware of, and there's a lot of danger in the Death Guard list, so that's what this video is all about. So in this series, which if you guys enjoy this might become a series of videos, we'll try and help you out with some of the challenges you may face. And here's a small disclaimer: I don't plan to share every single model or rule in this video. We're probably aiming for about half an hour video, so this is just an overview of some of my experiences against Death Guard and what strategies have helped me secure wins. And it's a pretty high win rate we have against them. I'd say like almost 70, 75, maybe even 80%. So army abilities, and this is an overview. Imagine for the Space Marine army or a Blood Angels army, you're talking about stuff like Red Thirst and They Know No Fear and Bolter Discipline. So for Death Guard, they have plagued weapons. So each time an attack is made with this weapon, they can reroll wounds of 1. It doesn't sound so strong on its own, but it will combo up very quickly when we talk about Contagions of Nurgle. They also have Remorseless, so each time a combat attrition test is taken with this unit, they ignore any or all modifiers, which means that if you ever do make them fail a leadership test, they will only have models run away on 1s. It's never going to be 1s and 2s like if the squad is less than half strength. The Death Guard don't care, they always just flee on a 1. They've got Malicious Volleys, which I guess is very similar to the Bolter Discipline, and rapid fire weapons can be shot at maximum range if the infantry remains stationary, and also they can be shot max range whilst moving with their Terminators, and they do have various Terminator squads that we will talk about a little bit later. They're also disgustingly resilient, and this is one of their strongest rules. So each time an attack is made to a model in this unit, which is pretty much the entire Death Guard army, they're going to be -1 to the damage characteristic of the attack, down to a minimum of 1. Now this is essentially the same as Duty Eternal rule that we have on our Dreadnoughts. However, this is very, very good against Blood Angels. It essentially takes any 2 damage unit or weapon that does 2 damage and removes 50%. So Sanguinary Guard basically get a 50% debuff against Nurgle. It's quite difficult to deal with. If you think about a 3 damage weapon like a Thunderhammer, it gets basically a 33% reduction in damage because it's -1 of the 3. So 3 damage and above weapons are definitely going to be useful against Nurgle or Death Guard, because -1 on 2 damage is kind of horrific. It's just a 50% decrease. Now, they also have Contagions of Nurgle. So that is while an enemy unit is within contagion range of this model, or this unit, subtract 1 from the toughness characteristic of this model. However, further rules can also be incurred when you're within contagion range. So we're going to come to some warlord traits and stuff that affect units that are within contagion range as well. But basically, if you are within 1 inch in battle round 1, 3 inches in battle round 2, 6 inches in battle round 3, and 9 inches in battle rounds 4 and 5, you will be -1 toughness. So as a Space Marine player, most of our stuff is going to be T4, so you're essentially going to be reduced to T3. And remember, a lot of the weapons are going to be plaid weapons, so you're going to be T3, and then they're going to get to reroll 1s on wounds as well. So quite often, Death Guard will be wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s. So Transhuman is going to be your friend here. But just be aware that anything you can do to get some more models, some more toughness, can actually be really, really useful against Death Guard. Something that might be useful, for example, is Might of Heroes from a Librarian. So one of the next things that they have is Inexorable Advance, which means the Bubotic Astartes, which is pretty much all their infantry, and I think a lot of their other units as well. They count as remain stationary if they did not fall back or advance. So basically, if they made a normal move, they still count as remaining stationary, and then I guess that's going to tie in with a bunch of their shooting strats, but I actually think that their melee combat is a lot more scary than their shooting. If they're shooting you with their infantry, etc., it's not the biggest deal. It also has, if this unit has a vehicle keyword, it does not suffer the penalty incurred to its hit rolls for firing heavy weapons at enemy units that are within engagement range. So even if you do manage to make the charges against like their tanks and other units, they are still going to be able to just shoot their heavy weapons in close combat with no penalty, which is very strong against Blood Angels. Combined with the previous rule that we mentioned, the -1 damage, this is doubly strong against Blood Angels. If this unit has the infantry keyword, it can ignore any and all modifiers to its move characteristic, advance rolls, and charge rolls. So, in some ways, you could consider a Thunderfire Cannon, because one of the biggest weaknesses, I guess, of Death Guard is their movement. So like, if you were going to use Tremor Shells on their Terminators, then that would have actually been a good move, because their Terminators are very slow. This makes them ridiculously slow, but unfortunately, infantry can just ignore this due to the Inexorable Advance. So Thunderfire Cannons, I guess, no good against Death Guard. Now, objective secured wise, they just have Plague Marines and Poxwalkers. So and it's kind of difficult for them to take too many objective secured units. So OBSEC isn't the biggest deal, and these, Plague Marines are kind of more expensive in terms of they're probably some of the most expensive troops in 9th edition. They are T5 troops, so I mean they are durable troops, but tend to not get obsec'd out too much by the Death Guard. And then they also have deadly pathogens, and this basically means like a Death Guard character or model or champion, which is basically the Death Guard sergeant of a squad. In that squad can be granted a deathly pathogen, which further increases the bonuses of plaid weapons which they wield. So very much how we can Angel as Ascendant and give one of our sergeants something special, they can do the same with a deadly pathogen, and we're going to cover all these in the next few minutes. So when the Death Guard player musters their force, they can pick units and put them all within inside the same Plague Company. Each Plague Company has an additional Warlord Traits, Relics, and Stratagems. And I've listed the Warlord Traits here because these are the things we really need to know about. If we are in contagion range of a Warlord with one of these traits, these are going to give additional bonuses on top of the -1 toughness. So the Harbinger is going to deal mortal wounds to nearby non-vehicle units each turn, which is okay. In the Inexorable, it's going to add additional point of AP to attacks. Again, I think this is just okay. Mortarion's Anvil is a very difficult one to deal with, especially if it's picked by Mortarion himself. He basically makes units, they cannot fire Overwatch or set to defend. Rerolls to hits and wounds also cannot be made. So against something that we usually use, like some Warlord in the Sanguinary Guard, not being able to reroll the hits can really cause some problems. The Wretched is unmodified rolls of 6, do auto wounds when they hit. I don't actually think this is that strong because we already mentioned the Contagion and the Played Weapons is good enough. I don't think there's much value in if the enemy picks the Wretched. The Poxmongers can kind of be a counter to Oath of Moment secondary in that it subtracts 1 from all your leadership and 1 from your combat attrition tests, meaning that there is more chance of you failing leadership tests, which could hurt your score for Oath of Moment. The Ferryman is also a very hard counter, I think, against Blood Angels, in that it halves your movement characteristic if you're within Contagion range. So all of our nice 12-inch jump pack units suddenly just become 6-inch move. This could be very, very problematic. I haven't run into this one so much myself, but on paper it sounds like it could be one of the hardest counters that we could play against for a Death Guard attachment. And then Mortarion's Chosen Sons as models obviously do not benefit from cover. So let's move on and talk about Psychic Strength. And I think in a Death Guard list you could easily find yourself up against 3 or 4 Psychers. Potentially expect something like Mental Interrogation or Psychic Ritual secondary being a possibility. The way I think that you can easily find yourself up against the Psychers is some of their Psychers are very cheap, 75 points. Mortarion is a Psyker, the Demon Princes are Psyker, and Mortarion and Demon Princes are very, very strong melee units that usually find their way onto the battlefield, so we just need to be aware of that they're probably going to potentially be enough Psychers where they can really score some easy secondary points through Mental Interrogation or Psychic Ritual, which means if you do not have any denies or you only have 1 deny, it could end up being quite a difficult game. So I recently played against a 3 Psyker Death Guard list with no Psyker, and it felt very rough, and I think they did score 12 or 15 points for Mental Interrogation. I mean, I had no way to deny it. They would only need to cast it off on a warp charge of 4, and one of the times he did actually roll a 4, so if I had a deny I could have probably denied some points. Some of the key powers that they have right now are Miasma of Pestilence, which makes a Death Guard unit -1 to hit, and that combos up with their impressive toughness. You know, like, they all have good toughness, everything has really strong toughness, so -1 to hit can make things just very difficult to kill. And if this is cast on Mortarion and you are going to have to kill and deal with Mortarion, I highly recommend you save your deny and try and deny this, because Mortarion is already horrifically strong. If he's -1 to hit, he is really nasty. Curse of the Leper is also a pretty strong one, so they get to roll 7d6, 7 is Nurgle's magic number, and if each roll that exceeds the enemy toughness is a mortal wound. And remember, if you're in Contagion range, then you are -1 toughness, so he's got 7d6, any 4 up is a mortal wound. It's probably a good way to get like 3 to 4 mortal wounds. I've definitely seen this do lots of mortal wounds with a good roll. And then he's also got Gift of Contagion, which is a solid counter against Blood Angels, and you get to subtract 1 strength from each model in an enemy unit, and if you roll high enough, I believe it's a warp charge of 8, I think it goes off on a 5, and if you roll over the warp charge of 8, you subtract 1 attack too. So there's a few powers here that we need to be aware of that are going to make our lives a lot more difficult. So let's go into a little bit of thoughts and strategies. So generally it's very difficult to wound the army, as they all tend to be toughness 5 or above, and then the -1 damage and the sheer amount of invulnerable saves make them very durable. I think just about every vehicle they run has a 3+ and then a 5+ invulnerable save, so you have a lot of invulnerable saves and a lot of high toughness to deal with. So when you're selecting targets, I would say, like, be very, very certain that you will make the kills with any shooting that you have. Focus targets down, and yeah, it's just splitting fire is generally going to be probably a bad idea here, unless you're able to do the math super quick in your head. Then focus targets down and consolidate your firepower and your army, because even some of your charges into their models, with all the -1 damage that they've got rolling around and the high invulnerable saves, it can be very, very difficult to make kills. For example, I think I had a squad of 5 Blade Guard veterans fight Playburst Crawler, which is a tank, in close combat for about 5 rounds of combat, and once in the initial round where I charged, I did about 3 wounds to it because of the -1 damage, and it's T8, so I'm only wounding on 4s. And then once the Red Thirst bonus falls off. So an additional round of combat's beyond the first round of combat. I think only did like 1 or 2 wounds to it through 3 or 4 more rounds of combat. So if you do not kill something on your charge with Red Thirst, you can potentially have your unit stuck in combat for a long time, and it'll just be a back and forth. They won't be doing too much killing against you, if it's Blade Guard veterans for example, but you won't be doing much killing back against them at all. Obviously, the -1 damage is a big problem with the Blade Guard veterans because their swords are normally 2 damage. So that's that 50% damage reduction coming into factor that I talked about. Okay, so combined with a ton of their weapons potentially doing 2 damage or more and being highly effective at killing Marines, especially with the Contagion bringing most Marines down to toughness 3, they tend to wound on 2s, rerolling 1s. So, yeah, I mean, like, I think when I was playing, I was using Transhuman on the Blade Guards a lot, but against other units, you are going to get wounded a lot by Death Guard. It's going to be pretty easy for them. I guess if they're strength 6 or above, they're going to be wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s. If they're strength 5, or even if they're strength 4, it's going to be wounding on 3s, rerolling 1s. So all you really have at that point is hoping that they miss with usually like an average weapon skill of about 3. So this comes straight into the next point. So when engaging in close combat, ensuring and skewering kills is probably the most important thing. Like I'd rather charge 2 units into 1 Death Guard unit and get rid of it than have my 2 units bogged down in combat with 2 different units and not killing them. And I think, like I said, their models are typically slow. I mean, Mortarion and Demon Princes with wings are the exception, and I guess maybe Fetid Bloat Drones with we're going to come to Fetid Bloat Drones in a few minutes. So most of the other stuff is pretty slow. So making sure that we dictate the charges and we make the kills is going to be one of the most important things about the matchup. One of our best tactics against this, like I've just said, is to use your mobility and speed against them. However, there is a hard counter to this, and that's that the droning from the Ferryman Plague Company. So if they have a Ferryman Plague Company, you need to know before the battle begins where that warlord is that has the droning trait, and you need to fight around that, because if you get bogged down by that and they can make all the charges and you can't focus down specific units, you're going to have a tough day. So, and I kind of also want to talk a little bit about shooting, and I know shooting maybe isn't the core of Blood Angels, but I like to run a good amount of shooting in my lists, and I like to focus my shooting on any of their fast-moving targets that are designed to inflict early contagion on our army, right? So one example of this is definitely the Fetid Bloat Drone. It is a fast-moving flyer with 12 inches. It's got a toughness 7 and like 9 wounds, and it's got that 5+ invulnerable save. So if the opponent's running a few of these, they're pretty cheap as well, like 130 points. They're going to run them into your army early, same as those Demon Princes that can fly. And the idea is that they're going to put a fast-moving, tough unit in close to your army to try and get you into contagion range and make all their shooting more effective against you, right? Like from Playburst Crawlers or whatever, because you're going to be on that less toughness, and it's going to make their wounding that much more reliable. So we're going to come back to this in section 7, but shooting fast-moving targets is kind of a priority, but I suppose it depends on the list. You just need to think about that. If a single unit is going to inflict contagion on a large part of your army, then to me, that unit needs to get deleted so that we can at least get through the early turns and then decide later in the game when we're going to engage within the contagion range, because the -1 toughness is going to make your units much, much squishier than they normally are. Okay, sometimes when you play against Death Guard, their lists are really overloaded with threats, and with their general survivability here, I rarely pick secondaries that require me to kill them, right? Because I've already said how difficult it is to make those kills. In some of my recent games, I have killed a lot of Death Guard and lost the game, and in some of the other games I've killed very few Death Guard and won the game. So I think good choices for secondaries against the Death Guard are secondaries that are not going to require you to essentially kill them. You're going to hold your primaries and you're going to score your secondaries, and you're going to pick and choose your battles. And as such, I've mentioned a few Blood Angels ones here: Engage on All Front and Relentless Assault, dependent on the deployment zone and the map layout. Oath of Moment, I suppose if they didn't take the Plague Company that's going to make that very difficult for you. We've also got Retrieve Victorious Data or maybe Raise Banners, and then you could also look at the Mission Secondary. So there's just a few that I would probably say are going to be safer picks. I mean, occasionally you might look at their list and think, yes, sure, I can bring it down here because they have a lot of tanks and I've brought a lot of, you know, Thunderhammers that are going to kill tanks, but these are safer ones, and it's just something to consider when you are up against the Death Guard. So let's start talking about some key units, and we'll start with Mortarion, who is their Daemon Primarch, who is toughness 8, 18 wounds, a 3+ save, a 4+ invulnerable save, a 5+ feel no pain, and -1 from damage. Bear in mind that he can also cast that -1 to hit, and he always spreads contagion for 9 inches. He buffs nearby core and characters with hits and rerolls. He also has an aura that means like enemy units within 3 inches of this warlord cannot be affected by any auras as well, excluding those that are from psychic powers. He can cast 2 psychic powers and deny 3. If he ever dies, it's D3 mortal wounds within a bubble of 6 inches. He can pick one or any of the Plague Company Warlord traits as well, on top of what he currently has above, which typically is Mortarion's Anvil, denying you all rerolls within that 9 inches bubble. And then he's got a singular vector-based attack with his pistol, which is -3 damage. So if you've got your troops in a line, he can shoot through them for 12 inches. He can hit multiple units. And then his weapon is Strength 16, D3 plus 3, and it's a played weapon, so that's hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, -4 AP, 7 attacks. And he can choose to change the weapon to just Strength 8 -2, but do 3 hits instead, giving him 21 attacks. So Mortarion is like 490 points. But I think when you play against Mortarion, there's 2 options. You either have to commit heavily to kill him, or you need to try and play around him. Playing around him can be very difficult, especially if the enemy just wants to put him center board. But you know, in a recent game against Death Guard, I actually null zoned Mortarion. I denied his power Miasma of Pestilence, which makes him -1 to hit. I cast Null Zone and I killed him in turn 1 actually. I think a couple of Dreadnoughts shot him, and then my Sanguinary Guard jumped in and did the remaining wounds. So he is killable. I don't know if he's that killable without Null Zone in a single turn, unless you're going to throw literally everything that you have at him. So Mortarion can be a real tricky one. If you've not fought him before, I think you just have to, you really have to commit heavy. So with Null Zone, which means basically like he had no save, I believe I had my Sanguinary Guard in Assault Doctrine turn 1 due to the Blood Chalice. So I had like 7 Sanguinary Guard and 2 Dreadnoughts with the Macroplasmas and Onslaughts and Rocket Pods as well, I think. And I think there was some other firepower that went into him too, maybe like the Whirlwind or something. So, and that just killed him. Maybe left him like, he would have maybe been like -1 wounds. So it was touch and go actually. He almost survived. So if I did not have Null Zone off on him, then 7 Sanguinary Guard and a bunch of Dreadnoughts all throwing everything into him is only going to take about half of his wounds. And when he attacks back, I guess if he was going to attack the Sanguinary Guard back, for example, Strength 16, hitting on Strength 16, wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, basically, and a -3 Sanguinary Guard really aren't saving reliable. I guess he would probably wipe almost the whole squad of Sanguinary Guard. With a little bit of luck, he probably would kill the whole squad of Sanguinary Guard. So you would potentially lose 200-300 points of Sanguinary Guard. Mortarion's now free to jump in and probably kill a Dreadnought next turn. So without the Null Zone, he's going to be very, very difficult to kill. And he's probably one of the reasons that I recommend including Null Zone in like a Psychic Master in your army. And even then, you're needing a little bit of luck, because he does have 3 denies, so he's 100% going to deny your Null Zone. So tactics for him needs to be if you know he's going to be up in your mids, you need almost like a turn of shooting to just get, I don't know, 5 or 6 wounds off of him, and you're going to need to shoot a lot at him to just do 5 or 6 wounds, especially if he's -1 to hit. You know, if you look at the plasma cannon on the Dreadnought, for example, on average it's going to get 3 shots. It's only going to hit on 4s, so at best you're going to get like a couple of hits. You're only going to wound on 3s, so you're probably only going to make 1 wound, so then it's a 50-50 chance if he saves it, and if he doesn't save it, it's only 2 damage, then it's a 5+ feel no pain. So, you know, Redemptor Dreadnought's plasma cannons are going to do at best like 2 damage to him a turn, and that's with a little bit of luck on your side. So they could simply do no damage or 1 damage. So he needs a lot of firepower. He is a very strong unit. When you want to kill him, make sure you commit heavily, because if you leave him alive, it's going to be a very, very bad day for you. Okay, moving on, the Fetid Bloat Drone, and I talked about the Bloat Drone already, and these are cheap. I think it's 130 points. They're fast moving, and they've got toughness 7, 9 wounds, and they also have that 5+ invulnerable save, and they've got -1 damage from Disgustingly Resilient, and these can be thrown forward at will by the Death Guard player, really, to try and get those early close combats, and also to get contagion spread around. The Fleshmoor, if it's armed, it can be armed with like flamers, but if it's armed with a Fleshmoor, which I think is the scarier of the 2 options, it's a strength 7, -2, 2 damage weapon with rerolls of 1s to wound again due to the plague weapons. So against most of our Marines, against most of our Marines, Gravis Marines, I guess it would wound on 3s, rerolling 1s, but against all other T4 Marines, it's wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s, and it's got 12 attacks. So his weapon skill 3, so if you average about 8 attacks, he's going to get 8 wounds, right? Wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s, maybe 7. So you're going to have to very quickly take a lot of 5-up saves, even on 4-up saves on Sanguinary Guard, and with each failed save is a dead model. I had one of these guys wipe out my whole squad of 7 Sanguinary Guard in a single turn. 130 point model. And they're very quick, and they're very difficult to kill, and they can heroically intervene 6 inches for 1 CP. If they do have the flamers, I've said they're not bad, but I think in melee they're just terrific, and they synergize really well with the spread of contagion. And if the enemy is going to bring 3 of them with their T7 and 9 wounds, -1 damage, 5+ invulnerable save, it's going to be very difficult for Blood Angels. Armies typically are not going to have enough to shoot all 3 of them out before they get in range, so you just need to be aware how fast they move and how difficult they are to deal with. Okay, next up is the Playburst Crawler, and this is a great support, heavy support unit, I think. It's T8, it's 12 wounds, the same invulnerable save, the same -1 damage, and it's very competitively costed. Like, it's 165 points, and I actually think it's kind of a crazy strong tank for the points. It's got a powerful indirect firing solution, which is strength 8, -2, 2 damage, and it's D6 shots, and it's also a plague weapon. So again, against Marines, even if you're not within contagion range, it's wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s. Its entropy cannons are basically las cannons, but D3 + 3, so they're more reliable. They just have 36 inches, so again, they're plague weapons, so you're getting to reroll those wounds of 1s. This can also use its indirect fire solution in engagement range for 1 CP, so if you do get in close combat with it, it can still shoot all its weapons, even the blast ones, in close combat with no penalty, remember, because of their inexorable advance rule. And typically it's common to see more than 1 Playburst Crawler. I think they're a great tank. 2 or 3 of them are they're very difficult to kill. They can hang back, and they can just deal out a lot of damage. So I've done a little bit of math on this because I recently fought some, and I was using my Sanguinary Guard against them. So Sanguinary Guard killing these is pretty nasty. 8 with swords or axes, right? Because swords and axes are both going to wound T8 on 4+, are going to get 40 attacks, right? If you're in Assault Doctrine. It's going to be less attacks if you're not in Assault Doctrine, but if you're in Assault Doctrine, it's 40 attacks. So hitting on 3s, that's 27 hits. Wounding on 4s, that's 13.5 wounds. Remember, it is -1 damage, so 13.5 wounds is just 13.5 damage. So with their 5+ invulnerable save, that's only around 10 damage. So if you jumped 8 Sanguinary Guard in on one of these, they're not going to kill it. They're going to leave it with a few wounds, and like I said, it can attack you back and then it can shoot all its weapons at you. So you need to get some wounds off them before, or you need to ensure that your Sanguinary Guard either have Chapter Master rerolls or they're near the Warlord for Heirs of Ezekiel or something. So it just shows you how much that -1 damage actually comes into it, and how big of a nerf it is against like units like Sanguinary Guard. And I guess this is one of the reasons like I just do not include any Power Fists now in my 9th edition list. I think Power Fists have probably fallen off. Let's talk about Death Shroud Terminators next, and these are Toughness 5 Terminators with 3 wounds that have a 4++ invulnerable save, and again -1 damage. So it's going to be another big commitment to get these Terminators off the table. Do you see a pattern here? Everything I'm like is a big commitment, and this is probably why. This is why I'm making this video, and this is why I'm saying to you, make sure that you double down on your firepower against the right targets against Death Guard. These Terminators also have the Bodyguard rule, so that means that obviously you cannot shoot anything else that is with any characters that are within 3 inches of them. So they can potentially be used to like screen Mortarion, so that the enemy can guarantee Mortarion can move across the board and then jump in on full health. And you, like I said, one of the main things I would probably do against Mortarion if you're going to deal with them is try and whittle them down, because you're going to need a big commitment and a bit of luck with Null Zone to kill him. So if you don't get the chance to whittle him down because he's bodyguarded with Terminators, you have a tough fight on your hands, 100%, right? They have no major shooting threat. They do have a strength 3 d6 shots, which can be okay within contagion range, but at long range it's not really any, it's not any big deal. Their weapon can also be chosen in close combat to be strength 7, -3 AP2 damage, with a -1 to hit, because it's essentially like their equivalent of a Power Fist. But when they have the contagion on you and you're going to be toughness 3, they're going to wound on 2s, rerolling 1s again. So with 21 attacks, expect to save 13 times at -3. It's still going to be difficult, right? And this would be from a squad of 5. They can also make double the hits at strength 5 -1 damage, so they can get 42 attacks. And I think I actually really like how some of the weapons now are getting these different attack modes. We didn't get any of that in the Blood Angels Codex, but I think it's a pretty cool option that some of these other chapters or factions or armies have got. And yeah, maybe in the future, maybe Dante could get his axe upgraded to have a couple of weapon modes. I would love that. But anyway, Death Shroud Terminators can be quite difficult to deal with, and remember, they are Terminators, so they could join Mortarion with some sort of teleport strike as well, making up for their slow movement. Next up, we also have the Mythic Blight Haulers, and I've said like they're basically Death Guard attack bike equivalents. I'm not really sure how you would categorize them, but again, it's T7, it's 9 wounds, it's 5+ save, it's -1 damage. So again, really difficult to kill. They are 140 points. What you get for that is you get a multi-melta, a missile launcher, and the bile spurt, which is an assault D3, strength 6 plague weapon that has blast, and it's also fireable with an engagement range. So because they're so difficult to kill in close combat, then you're going to be able to shoot your bile spurt in close combat against any targets that remain. They can also be run in squads of 3, and while I guess a squad of 3 comes in at like 420 points, they're just, it's going to be basically what? 27 wounds to remove the squad of 3 with a -1 damage. Yeah, and I guess there are also no chump in close combat, and what I mean by that is they're -1 in melee, because they have this foul stench rule. So, and each Blight Hauler gets 4 attacks at the user's strength of 6. Combine that with the contagion, again, we'll probably be in contagion range, so we'll be on -1, so we'll be toughness 3. They're basically, again, see a pattern here? They're going to be wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s, and they are plagued weapons, and they are -2 AP, 1 damage. So 3 of them is going to get 12 attacks. Again, you're probably going to get like 8 hits out of that with their weapon skill of 3. So, and then they're always going to wound. So you're going to just have to take 8 AP -2 saves. Again, very, very good at killing Marines and good at surviving. Like, it's I like a lot of the Death Guard units. They are very, very durable. Alright, next let's talk about the Foul Blight spawn. And this is a cheap character for 75 points. And I've played against some lists that run 2 Foul Blight spawns. And these guys are kind of horrific. They have a really good Flamer, which is strength 7, minus 3/2 damage, which makes charging them a little difficult potentially because of Overwatch. They have 2d6 Plague Grenades and the ability to make a unit within 3 inches fight last. Now, one way I've dealt with these is I've driven my Bite Captain 14 inches forward and Infernal Pistoled them to the face. They don't have an invulnerable save, so this is one way of reliably getting rid of them. You could do this obviously with a Jump Captain or Commander Dante, maybe with a little bit less reliability, but in close combat, and if they're well positioned, this can make your life as a Blood Angels horrific. They also have an aura if they take the Relic Revolting Stench Vats, and this is a hard counter to a lot of things that we do. So while an enemy unit is within 6 inches of the bearer, that unit cannot make use of any rules that allow it to fight first, and never count as having made a charge move this turn, irrespective of any abilities the units have. So what that means is, if you ended a charge and you're within 6 inches of the Foul Blight spawn, we don't get Shock Assault because we don't count as being charged. We don't get Savage Echoes because we don't count as having charged. And we don't get Red Thirst. So, lose 2 attacks on every model and lose our +1 to wound. And then expect to be attacked first by the Death Guard models. So this can make a blob of Death Guard essentially unchargeable. So in 9th edition, I've often said that I don't think all melee combat charging Blood Angels armies work, and I guess this is one of the reasons that I don't think it works, because if I play against Death Guard with this, there's literally no way for me to charge a blob of whatever they have around the Blight spawn. If I don't have enough shooting, bear in mind, everything that I'm going to be shooting at is high toughness, T5, T7 potentially, so I have no way of getting rid of the models around them. And then, yeah, so the Foul Blight spawn, if it's on the table, it can be a huge problem. It comes back to what I said earlier about using your mobility against the Death Guard. I mean, this unit won't be moving fast. I think it'll be moving 5 or 6 at best. So move around them, whittle them down with your firepower. Don't ever go into range of the Revolting Stench Vat if you can. There is one interesting thing to say here, in that this talks about charging and not heroically intervening. So if there is a play to be made where you can have your Sanguinary Guard in a position to heroically intervene into the unit of Death Guard troops, then we can still get Shock Assault, Savage Echoes, Red Thirst, right? Because it talks about charging. So it's an edge play, and you're going to have to be very smart, and the opponent probably doesn't. The opponent even needs to forget your Sanguinary Guard have that 6-inch heroic intervention, or is not super familiar with Blood Angels, but it is something I've managed to use once, I believe, and so keep that in mind. But it is very, very difficult if the opponent is running Foul Blight spawns, and this is why I like to balance. This is one of the reasons I like to balance my list with a good amount of shooting. So while I've talked about a lot of other things being slow, the Possessed are kind of a nasty little melee unit that can overwhelm you. They are reasonably fast with a 7-inch move. They bring around 40 Plagued Weapon attacks at strength 5, minus 2/1 damage. And remember, you're going to be T3 at this point, so it's going to be wounding on 3s, rerolling 1s, so they're fairly reliably wounding again against Marines. And they're still toughness 5, they're still -1 damage, they've got that invulnerable save. So Possessed, I tried to kill them with Flamers before and it literally did very little against them. So yeah, I just keep your eye out for a group of Possessed moving around the battlefield. They're going to be the fast moving melee unit, or the faster, I guess, that still need to be dealt with, and ultimately you really don't want them charging you either. So again, we come on to try and dictate who's charging who, because we have that improved mobility usually from our jump units. We're also going to end the key unit section with the Daemon Prince, and we talked about the Demon Prince, and this is the Demon Prince of Nurgle here. He's T6, he's got 8 wounds. He can have an 8-inch move, or you can pay and give him fly in the 10-inch move. His main weapon, which can be a sword for strength 8 minus 3 damage, or an axe for strength 9 minus 2 damage, is also essentially a marine killer. All our 2-wound marines and even Terminators are going to die against his swords or axes very easily. Again, he's going to be wounding on 2s and rerolling 1s. And actually, I don't think he rerolls 1. Sorry, I don't think the Death Guard Demon Prince's weapon is a plagued weapon, but it seems very strange that everything else is, but it's not. And then he can also cast a psychic power or 2 here as well and deny something. So pretty cool. I was going to say little character, little compared to Mortarion, but still a reasonably sized character that can do a lot of damage on the battlefield. So let's get into battle priorities. And I've touched on this a little bit throughout this video, but we'll go through this and maybe it'll help you a little bit more as well. So in my last few games, I've been up against Mortarion, like 3 fetid bloat drones, multiple Playburst Crawlers, and Mythic Blight haulers. So it's been a very elite-based list, and this means the tactics for the enemy will be usually to use Mortarion and 3 fetid bloat drones to infect you with contagion very early on, and then drop you with ranged firepower and keep you pushed back with all the melee they can throw out as well. If you try and deal with the in your threat's face, or the threats in your face rather, to try and cancel out that contagion, which obviously makes us a lot weaker. In my list I said I run 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, and here's the tricky part. If you shoot both high power macroplasma cannons, which is strength 9 minus 4 damage, at 1 bloat drone, you're actually going to need 11.5 successful wound rolls to kill one of these. So in the game where I tried to do this, and while in that game I did actually kill all his armor, I lost the game quite badly. If you can remove the invulnerable save, this will decrease the amount of shots by 33%, obviously the inverse of the 5+. So I don't know many Blood Angels players that are running more firepower than a couple of Redemptor Dreads. I mean, maybe some people are running some multi-melta attack bikes as well, but I mean, multi-melta attack bikes are going to get picked off very, very quickly by Playburst Crawlers with indirect fire if they want to. You know, they'll be able to shoot you with their indirect fire cannons as well. So here's the thing, I guess. If you're running, let's say, a couple of multi-melt attack bikes and a couple of Redemptor Dreadnoughts, you will have enough firepower to drop 1 fetid bloat drone at range. I mean, that's great, I suppose, but at the same time, you still got 2 more fetid bloat drones and Mortarion coming after you. So in the game that I won against the same list, or a very similar list, we went the opposite way, and we threw our Librarian forward as a sacrificial lamb, we cast Null Zone, and we put everything into Mortarion. I find, though, in general, Mortarion is a giant problem, right? The amount of firepower you need to drop him is pretty intense, especially with the potential -1 to hit from the Psychic Mastery. So again, whenever you can deny Miasma of Pestilence, try and do that. I really recommend... Oh, I've just said that. He also can take that Gloating Bloat, which prevents all rerolls within contagion range, which means like Lightning Claws, you know, there's no rerolls to wound, Sanguinary Guard, there's no rerolls to hit, which are arguably 2 of our strongest things that we could use right now. And I guess another thing that's interesting is that we do actually have a stratagem, Death to the Traitors, which gives us full rerolls for 1 CP on a unit against a unit that is Heretic Astartes, but this will prevent that as well. So it's worth noting that Death to the Traitors can be used elsewhere, you know, away from Mortarion if he doesn't have that glowing bloat warlord trait, to get some good advantages elsewhere, but it's not going to help you if you're within contagion range of Mortarion. Like I said, shooting Mortarion is also really rough. 3 multi-melta attack bikes will only average 1.67 wounds per turn against him. Half range and Null Zone actually only increases this to 6. So if you remove his invulnerable save and you're at half range with 3 multi-melta attack bikes, you average 6 damage. So it's like I said, it's a big commitment if you're going to go after Mortarion. Playburst Crawlers also take some doing to kill. We mentioned earlier 8 Sanguinary Arden Assault Doctrine with full rerolls and a 2+ to hit because they're close to the Warlord is only going to average 12.8 damage. They have 12 wounds, so any poor rolls means you're not even going to guarantee a kill. So Playburst Crawlers need to be whittled down a little bit if possible from shooting before. I mean, I only run 1 squad of Sanguinary Arden, it's not 8. It's a 7 in my list. So tactical shooting and knowledge of the enemy strength is going to be very important in this matchup. I really hope this video and everything that I've talked to you about so far is going to help. And I mean, I do fight Death Guard quite often, and if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. I reply to every single comment on this channel, and I will do everything to help you get over your slump if you are losing consistently against Death Guard. So let's talk a little bit about a summary. I've already said it a couple of times in this video. I highly recommend bringing a Psyker with Null Zone against Death Guard, and I also recommend having him upgraded to Psychic Mastery to enable more denies and more reliable casting of Null Zone. I know that if he's upgraded to Psychic Mastery, or the Psychic, I like to call it Psychic Master. I know it's Psychic Mastery, but if your Librarian is the Psychic Master, then you have a 92% chance to cast Null Zone if you use a reroll. If he's not, it's only 75%. So it's a big increase, 17% more chance to cast it. Because Null Zone, remember, does have a warp charge of 7. I also just talked about Death to the Traitor, and it's often forgotten because it's in the Space Marine books, but it will let you reroll all hits versus Heretic Astartes units, and based on how difficult everything is to kill, this is definitely going to help you in close combat. And I would generally probably use it on if you have Vanguard veterans with Lightning Claws, giving those rerolls to hit could be the difference between you making the kill on the unit or not making the kill. Transhuman is going to help you a lot if you've got Primaris Marines, just because their plagued weapons and contagion is going to do a lot of work. And like I said, I often play against Death Guard on this channel, and I probably have like 10 battle reports up against them over the last year. And like I said, I think I pick and choose my battles. I think I probably won about 7 and maybe lost 3. So we're doing okay against Death Guard, but regardless, it's always a tough game, and we always have to use our strategy really, really well. And one other thing I like to talk about is on our Sunday Army List show. So I have a show that goes out every Sunday where we talk about Blood Angels armies, and I always recommend people include 10 or more weapons that do a minimum 3 damage. And a big part of the reasoning behind this is my battles against Death Guard. The -1 from Disgusting Resilient is a 50% damage reduction on anything that is 2 damage. Like I said, this is why I literally never include Power Fists, and on the 3 damage or more, it's less of a nerf, I guess. It's just a 33% loss. So 10 3 damage or more weapons, and you can choose what you want to bring. Infernal Pistols, Thunder Hammers, Dreadnought Claws, Macroplasmas on the Dread, Multi-Melt Attack Bikes. But I think if you have less than 10, you're going to have a very difficult time against Death Guard. I mean, the flip side of the coin could be, I suppose, if you brought tons of 1 damage weapons, but I think most people are including Sanguinary Guard that have got 2 damage weapons, and I was going to say, most people are including Sanguinary Guard. Maybe people are including like Terminators. I actually don't know where. That is a good question. I guess maybe we just don't bring that many 3 damage weapons to the fight normally. Like, we'll bring Lightning Claw Vanguard veterans, we'll bring a squad or 2 of Sanguinary Guard, we'll bring a few hammers on the Death Company, but not too many because they get very expensive very quickly. So it's just something to be aware of. If you have less than 10 3 damage or more weapons against Death Guard, it's I already said it's going to be difficult to kill them. It's going to be even more difficult to kill them. So think about your secondaries and try and pick secondaries that don't always have you relying on killing the enemy models to get points. If we can, against Death Guard, pressure them on weaker objectives while holding your own, dodge slowly moving units such as Terminators if possible, and pounce when the opportunity arrives. So I really mean, like, when you have 2 jump pack units that can get in with a single unit and you think that's enough to make the kill, go for it and just consolidate down on how you play. And if you found this video useful, and if you would like to see more like it against other army lists, or armies rather, please leave me a comment and a like, and I will get back to you 100%. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more Blood Angels content every week, please consider subscribing. And I'm going to put a link up here to a playlist of other tactics videos that will totally help you out, so I recommend you check out some of them as well. Or if you'd like to support the channel, you can always hit that like button. Likes are very much appreciated. Or find us down below on Patreon, or click the join button to become a channel member now. I really hope we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks ever so much for watching. By the blood are we made strong, brothers. Peace.